بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فإن أحسن الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدى هدى محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. Inshallah, to continue the series of topics that relate to the general theme of the conference or the seminar, which is looking at the situation and the condition of the Muslims today and speaking about the issues that relate to their rectification and correction. Then yesterday we spoke about al-ikhlas and how a servant should be concerned with correcting that which is between himself and his Lord as it relates to his sincerity in his actions and avoiding the pitfalls and the dangers of showing off, ar-riya and as-sum'a, and likewise doing actions which are actions of the hereafter but for worldly gain. And that because this is an issue which relates to the perfection of a person's tawheed, and because tawheed is from the greatest or is the greatest of the affairs of the religion, then no doubt that is an area of concern that every single Muslim, every single Salafi should pay a great amount of attention to in learning these issues and understanding these issues and applying these issues in their ibadah and their practice of the religion. So today, inshallah, I want to touch another issue which again relates to the condition of the Muslimin and the affairs of the Muslimin, and this is relating to the rulers and what has come in the Sunnah, what has come in the Quran, what has come in the Sunnah, and what has come in the manhaj of the Salaf in relation to how the Muslims are to deal with the rulers. And my lecture today, inshallah, is going to be divided into 3 sections. The first 2 sections will be very short, inshallah. And the first 2 sections, I just wanted to give some background information before I go into the main theme or the main content of the lecture, which will be 11 or 12 principles from the Quran and from the Sunnah that explain very clearly and explicitly how a Muslim should behave with those whom Allah has appointed over him, and the methodology that a Muslim should follow in relation to interacting with the rulers. So that will be the main part of the lecture, the third part. But before that, there are 2 sections that I want to speak about to help to put this subject into context. So the first part is if we look at the history of al-Islam and we look at how the deviations and the innovations appeared, the major innovations which appeared after the passing away of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Khulafa al-Rashideen, al-Mahdiyeen. If we look at the nature as to how this occurred, then it will help us to understand in the recent times why we have so much confusion and so much misunderstanding relating to this subject, meaning the subject of the rulers and how the Muslims should deal with them, how they should behave with them, and so on and so forth. So first of all, we find that in the time of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the time after his passing away and the time of the Khulafa al-Rashideen al-Mahdiyeen, 30 or so years, we find that alhamdulillah there was no major problems or deviations. Nothing occurred. The Sahaba would, the Messenger would receive revelation, he would convey that revelation to the Sahaba, they would understand that revelation and believe in whatever it contained of the affairs of Aqeedah and implement whatever it contained of the affairs of the rulings, and this is how it was. And then, after the time of the Khulafa, starting roughly around the year 37 Hijrah, up until roughly 100 Hijrah, this was a time in which we saw the emergence of the 4 sects, or the 4 groups, or the 4 deviant beliefs, which are the beliefs of the Khawarij, the beliefs of the Rafida, the Shia, and the beliefs of the Qadariyya, those people who deny a Qadar, and the belief of the Murji'ah, those people who don't believe that actions are from Iman, from the essence of Iman. But the point that I want to make here is that when you look at the deviations, the specific deviations, how did they originate and where did they come from? then that's the thing that we want to look at. So first of all, with respect to the Rafidah, the Shia, where did this belief and where did it originate from? We find that it was from a person by the name of Abdullah bin Saba, who was a Jew, and he came in the garb of Islam, and he came to the Muslimin, and he began to praise and raise the position of Ali radiallahu anhu. And as is mentioned in the Athar from the Salaf, that this person, that he would come and he would pretend, or he would claim, that in all of the previous books that Allah revealed, and including the Tawrat, that in those revelations, it would be mentioned that all of the prophets had, if you like, a close companion, or someone whom he left as a legacy. And that legacy of the Prophet Muhammad is Ali radiallahu anhu. So this is what he would claim. He would bring these false narrations and false claims and spread them amongst the Muslimin, so that they would raise Ali radiallahu anhu. So the point being that this belief from that time originated from where? It came from someone external to Islam, someone outside of al-Islam. Then likewise, the belief of, the false belief of rejecting al-Qadr, rejecting the divine predestination. We find that when we look in the books of history and the books of the Salaf, where they originate and trace where this belief came from, we find that they mention a person by the name of Al-Ma'bad al-Juhani. A person by the name of Al-Ma'bad al-Juhani. And how this person, he mixed and interacted with a Christian from Iraq, from the region of Iraq. And some of the scholars say, in some narrations it mentions that this person's name was Sawsan. In other narrations it says his name was Sansawayh. So irrespective of what his name was, he was a Christian, and Al-Ma'bad, he took the belief, or the belief of rejecting Al-Qadr from this Christian. And it is said that this Christian, he initially was a Christian, then he became a Muslim, then he reverted back to being a Christian. So this belief of Al-Qadr, and whatever followed on from that, then the Mu'tazila came afterwards and they took this belief, and again the point here is, where did this belief originate from? It came from someone outside of al-Islam, external to Islam, in this case a Christian. And likewise, maybe another 60, 70, 80 years after this time, or close to 100 years after this time, now roughly about 200, 250 Hijrah, we see now the rise of the Mu'tazila. And the reason why the Mu'tazila, they gained prominence, and why they gained lots of arguments and evidences for their batil, was because the books of the Greek philosophers, like Plato and Aristotle and Socrates, that these were translated. And the principles of Greek philosophy and logic, they were translated into Arabic. And that when these people, they saw what it contained, what these books contained, they found a new way of interpreting and looking at the verses in the Quran, especially the verses that speak about Allah's attributes, Allah's names. And then they began to use those principles in order to deny and to negate Allah's names and attributes. So where did this come from? It originated from outside of Islam, from the books of the Greek philosophers. So this is what we need to understand, that these deviations and these false beliefs and these innovations, where did they originate from? They originated from sources outside of al-Islam. So this is the first part, or the first introduction to my lecture. So keep this in mind, bear this in mind. Now the second part of my lecture, I want to cover the last 100 or last 120, 130 years of recent history. When we look at the Muslim nation, or the Muslim Ummah as a whole, and we look at what it went through in terms of colonization, and likewise at the same time, we saw in the lands of Europe many of these philosophies and ideologies, like Marxism and socialism, and these and revolutions that occurred, and philosophers who came and they began to speak about these ideologies. You find that around that time, in that period, like in the early 20th century up until the mid 20th century, this was the time when many of these major movements that we now see present in our times, like Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, specifically the Muslim Brotherhood, we find, and likewise the so-called, the Jamaat Islami, or this group which originated in Pakistan, India, we find that there were certain individuals who came during that time in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and I'll mention them specifically, the likes of Sayyid Qutb from Egypt, Hassan al-Banna from Egypt, and Maududi, Abu A'la Maududi from Pakistan, that these three individuals, when you go back and you study and you look into their works and the ideas that they propound in their works, you will find that just like those innovators of the early times took their ideologies and their beliefs and their principles and their methodologies from people outside of Islam, then likewise these three individuals, this is exactly what they did. This is exactly what they did. And I want to just give some illustrations at this point. Obviously this is an area of detailed research. All of the evidences are present, but just for the purpose of this lecture, I want to just give a few examples, just to make the point. So for example, if we look at Sayyid Qutb was a man who was heavily influenced by another person, by a French philosopher called Alexis Carrel. He's a famous French philosopher. And Alexis Carrel was a Christian, and Sayyid Qutb was very well read in this individual's books. And one of the main ideologies that this person has written in his books is that he's speaking about the Christian society. And he mentions how the Christian society in this time, meaning in his time, had basically become barbaric. They'd basically returned back to a type of barbarism. Like this word here, barbarism, in Arabic it's actually jahiliyyah. So a Christian is speaking about the Christians in general in his time, and he's describing them, that the society as a whole is like jahiliyyah, as we would describe the Arabs prior to the time of the coming of the Messenger, that they were in jahiliyyah. So this Christian Alexis Carrel in his books, this is a theme that he mentions often and he develops. And it is established that Sayyid Qutb was heavily influenced by this individual. And so then what we find is that in the books of Sayyid Qutb, what do we find in his books? Milestones, fi dhilal al-Quran, in the shade of the Quran, and all of his tafsir. What do we see? We see the same ideology. We see him bringing the same ideology. He now takes the ideas of Alexis Carrel and then applies them to the Muslim Ummah. So we find from some of his statements, we don't need to go through all of them, but just in meaning, that he says that verily the Muslim people today have reverted to a jahiliyyah that is worse than the first jahiliyyah. And he makes statements like this, that the whole of mankind have become apostates from the religion of al-Islam. And he develops this theme of jahiliyyah, that the jahiliyyah, the general jahiliyyah, has returned again. Where did this come from? This came from a Christian philosopher. Right? And this is just one of his ideas. There are other ideas as well, like revolution and, a violent revolution against the rulers, toppling them. All of these ideas have their origins in the philosophers of that time. To such a degree that even those people from the non-Muslims who are researchers and who are honest and who are shrewd and who know their history, even they themselves have written in their books that this ideology that Sayyid Qutb propounded in his books has more in common with the ideologies of Marx and Lenin than it does with Islam. Right? So even these non-Muslim researchers have come to that conclusion based upon their research. That's Sayyid Qutb. Likewise with Hassan al-Banna. Hassan al-Banna, when we look at his organization, there were many influences that came to him, but it's established that the Muslim Brotherhood had connections with the Nazis from Germany. Rather, they actually met with each other and visited each other. And when you look at the various organizational structures that Ikhwan al-Muslimin had, in terms of they used to have Boy Scouts and things like this, and units within the organization, all of that was just borrowed and copied from the Nazi youth, the National Socialist Party from Germany, to such a degree that they even had the same types of uniforms for their, like the Boy Scouts and so on and so forth. There are many other things that I can mention, but I'm just trying to give quick illustrations and quick points here so that you understand that these movements and the ideologies that they came with, where did they come from? They actually came from the prevailing ideologies and philosophies of the non-Muslims of that time. And likewise with Maududi was likewise influenced by the revolutionary ideologies that were present in the writings of the philosophers from the previous century. So in his books he says things like that the reason why the messengers came was to basically topple the rulers and establish the rule of Islam. And he develops this theme of like a violent, revolutionary resolve on behalf of the people in order to establish the Islamic state. What do we find? 15, 20 years earlier, we find the communist revolution, and we find in the books of all of these philosophers the same ideas. So the point that we're making is that these three individuals were heavily influenced by these external ideologies which came from the non-Muslims, and then they implemented them and integrated them into their teachings, and then they began to write books. Then they began to use verses from the Quran. Then they began to use hadith from the Sunnah to justify these ideologies. And then we find, just like in the early times, don't we see now today how the beliefs of the Ash'ariyya and the Mu'tazila and the aspects of the belief of the Qadariyya and the belief of the Murjiya, don't we find them present today? Of course we do. Because what they did in those times was to write books and to spread these innovations so that they flourished and became spread and widespread amongst ummah. What do we find today? The same thing. The same thing. To such a degree that today, so what happened is that due to these influences of these individuals, the principles of the Sunnah, the methodology in the Sunnah, as it relates to how we deal with the rulers, they became destroyed, and they became wasted, and they became forgotten. And this was because, due to the spread of this organization from Egypt to the Arab countries, and eventually when they began to come to the Western countries in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and they brought with them the books and translated the books and so on and so forth, due to all of these activities, we found that these ideologies of al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, they became widespread amongst the Muslims, up until this day. To such a degree that if you were to walk in the street and just ask any common Muslim, say to him, Akhi Muslim, why do you think that the Muslims are in the condition that they are today? The first thing that he will say to you, most likely he will say to you, it is because of the corrupt rulers. They are the problems. Right? So this is the degree to which these teachings have become widespread and become ingrained in the mind and the thinking of the Muslim. Right? Because of these reasons. And so therefore, and likewise, this Ikhwan al-Muslimin, when they spread, we found many different splinter groups, Jama'atul Jihad, the Jama'at of Takfir and Hijrah, like in Egypt, and you had groups like Hizb ut-Tahrir, and all of these different groups are basically the same in the origin, but they just have differences in how they fulfill their objectives of establishing, as they claim, an Islamic State. So this was the second thing that I wanted you to understand, that now that in the current time, just as the Salaf mentioned, that the Sunnah will be removed bit by bit up until a person can't even recognize the religion. This is how it is now. If you look at how the Muslims are thinking, you will find that they attribute the reasons and the causes for the problems of the Muslimin and the splitting of the Muslimin to something which is completely different to what is in the Sunnah. Completely different, as you will see when we look at the principles in the Sunnah. So I'm hoping then, inshallah, that from this introduction, you can at least now put some perspective and understand the situation that we are in today and where these ideologies came from, who were the individuals responsible for this. And now we want to compare and contrast what is written in the books of these people, and I mean here the books of Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna and Mawdudi, and likewise all those people after them up until this day who are promoting those beliefs, like Osama bin Laden, like the groups of Takfir, like the likes of Hizb ut-Tahrir, like individuals like Abu Hamza that we have in the UK, and this Abu Qatada, and all of these individuals, Muhammad al-Mas'ari, and Sa'ad al-Faqih, and all these people who are propagating this batil and this falsehood. We want to, as we read through these narrations from the Sunnah and from the Salaf, and we establish these principles, I want you to compare and contrast between what has been revealed by Allah upon the tongue of His Messenger and between what is propounded by these innovators and by these deviants who are misleading the Muslims with their false ideologies and their beliefs. So, this now leads me to the main part of my lecture, which is 11 or 12 principles from the Sunnah regarding the affairs of the rulers. So first of all, we begin by mentioning the time before the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How did it used to be? In that time, we find that all of the Arabs were basically in separation. They were separated from each other, and they differed with each other, and they would also fight with each other and have mutual boasting with respect to each other. We would find that the strong tribes would come and they would devour the weak tribes, and every single tribe would basically try to find any opportunity to attack and engage in a war with another tribe. And this is how it was. And then Allah sent the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Messenger was concerned with uniting them together and bringing them together upon Tawheed and encouraging them together. And he warned from splitting and differing, and he made them aware of this. And when we look in the Sunnah, in the Quran and the Sunnah, we find so many ahadith and so many verses which speak about this, of uniting and not differing. And likewise we find this in the speech of the Sahaba and the Salaf radiallahu anhum. Just to give some illustrations of this from the Quran and from the Sunnah, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in Surah Al-Anfal, وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا وَتَذْهَبَ رِيحُكُمْ, that do not dispute with each other, so that you lose courage and that your strength disappears. This is an ayah. Allah prohibits from dispute and so on and so forth. Likewise, Allah said in Surah Ali Imran, the third surah, verse 105, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا وَاخْتَلَفُوا مِنْ بَعْدِ مَا جَاءَهُمُ الْبَيِّنَاتُ وَأُولَٰئِكَ لَهُمْ عَذَابٌ عَظِيمٌ. That do not be like those who split and who differed after the clear proofs came to them, for them is a very mighty and severe punishment. And likewise from Usama bin Sharik, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Yadullahi alal jama'ah, that Allah's hand is over the jama'ah, meaning the united body of the Muslimin. So hadith sahih, reported by Ahmad ibn Abi Asim, at-Tabrani al-Hakim, authenticated by Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah. Likewise, Ka'ab bin Asim, he narrated that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, verily, he said, Inna Allah ta'ala ajara ummati min an tajtami'a ala dalalah. Verily, Allah, the Most High, has protected my ummah in that it should unite upon misguidance. And this hadith sahih, reported by Ibn Abi Asim at-Tirmidhi, authenticated by Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah. And likewise from Umar ibn al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Man arada buhbuhat al-jannah fa'alayhi bil jama'ah. That whoever desires the middle part of paradise, the middle and the uppermost part of paradise, then let him adhere to the jama'ah. For verily, shaitan is with the single person, meaning the person who remains isolated and by himself, and he is further away from two people. Hadith Sahih, reported by Ibn Abi Asim, and Ahmad, and At-Tirmidhi, and Al-Hakim, and Ibn Hibban. And every single hadith that I'm going to read to you, it is authenticated by Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah. And likewise, from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, there are three people, don't ask about them. Don't ask about them. Meaning that there are three people who, on account of these attributes, don't ask about them. Meaning that they are fine, there's nothing wrong with them. And the first characteristic is, don't even ask about them, meaning don't even be concerned with them. So this is like a negative rebuke. It's like a rebuke or a criticism. There are three people, don't even ask about them. A man who separated from the jama'ah and he disobeyed his imam and he died whilst he was in that state disobedient. Right? This hadith sahih, reported by Ibn Abi Asim and Ibn Hibban. Likewise from Abu Hurairah, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Man kharaja anil jama'a wa mata famitatun jahiliya. Whoever departed from the jama'ah and he died, then his death is the death of as in the days of jahiliya. And likewise from Nu'man bin Bushair, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al jama'atu rahma wal furqatu adab. That the jama'ah, the unity, is mercy, and separation and splitting is punishment. Hadith Sahih, reported by Ahmad and Ibn Abi Asim. And likewise, so there are many other hadith actually, but just from this you can see clearly this first principle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordered and He has commanded that there be a jama'ah, that the Muslimin be united. That's the first principle. And there are many, many texts, we're just giving some samples here. Second principle is that not only did Allah order that we be united, rather He warned from its opposite, which is that He warned from splitting. Just like we find in the Quran, Allah orders that we worship Him alone, and at the same time He prohibits that we worship anything besides Him. And likewise the Messenger ﷺ, in His Sunnah, He orders that we obey the Messenger, that we follow the Sunnah, and at the same time He warns severely that we follow other than the Sunnah, that we follow the innovations. He warns severely from that. And so similarly we find that not only did Allah, He ordered that we be united, He also prohibited from all splitting and all differing. So from that is that the Messenger in his Sunnah ﷺ, he warned from separating from the jama'ah in a very severe way, and he made a threat to anyone who did that, with a very severe threat. The Messenger said ﷺ, Man raghiba an sunnati falaysa minni, that whoever turns away from my sunnah, he is not from me. Hadith Sahih, reported by Bukhari and Muslim. Likewise from Ibn Umar, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Man naza'a yadahu min ta'ah lam yakun lahu yawmul qiyamah hudda. That whoever took his hand away from obedience, meaning obedience to the ruler, then he will not have any proof in his favor on the Day of Judgment. Hadith Sahih, reported by Ahmad and Ibn Abi Asim. And likewise, the Messenger ﷺ said, Man ataakum amrukum jami' ala rajulin wahid, yuridu an yashukka asakum wa yufarrika kalimatakum faqtuluh. That whoever comes to you whilst your affair is united behind a single man, and he comes in order to split you up and to separate your word, then kill him. Right? This is the punishment for a person who tries to come and create splits in the Muslim society and divisions in the Muslim society when they are united behind a single imam. Hadith Sahih, reported by Muslim. And there are many other verses, many other hadith in this regard. So first principle, we've been ordered with unity. Second principle, we've been prohibited in the most severe manner from splitting and differing. Third principle is that now we've established that Allah has ordered the jama'ah, and that the jama'ah is a source of mercy for the Muslimin, and that the jama'ah is the basis upon which the Muslims' affairs are regulated within the society. Then the third principle is that this jama'ah cannot be maintained and cannot be sustained except with an imam. Except with an imam. And this imam cannot maintain his duty, that which Allah intended for him, until the Muslims obey him. Until the Muslims obey him. So this is the third principle. That the imamah, that the affairs of the Muslimin cannot be straight except with an imam. And the imam cannot fulfill his duties in accordance with what Allah intended for him, except with at-ta'ah, with obedience on behalf of the Muslimin. And this is why in the Sunnah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we find another principle, that he ordered the Muslimin that they obey the Imam. From the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who said, as reported by Anas, "Isma'u wa ati'u wa in istu'mala alaykum abdun habashi ka'anna ra'sahu zabiba ma aqama fikum kitab Allah." So he said, hear and obey. Hear and obey, meaning the ruler. Even if an Abyssinian slave is appointed over you, his head being like the head of a raisin. Meaning, even if his appearance is like this, even if he be an Abyssinian slave, if he's appointed over you, and so long as he establishes the book of Allah, then hear him and obey him. Hadith Sahih, reported by Bukhari. And likewise, the Messenger said, as reported by Abu Hurairah, radiyallahu anhu, "Man ata'ani faqad ata'a Allah, wa man asani faqad asa Allah, wa man yuti'u al-amir faqad ata'ani, wa man ya'si al-amir faqad asani." Now look at this, look at the principle in this hadith. The Messenger said, whoever obeys me, then he has obeyed Allah. Whoever disobeys me, then he has disobeyed Allah. So first of all, the Messenger connected the obedience to him as being obedience to Allah, and the disobedience to him as being the disobedience to Allah. And then he said, whoever obeys the Amir, then he has obeyed me. And whoever disobeys the Amir, then he has disobeyed me. So look at the connection. If a person obeys the ruler, he's obeyed the messenger, and whoever obeys the messenger, he's indeed obeyed Allah. Whoever disobeys the Amir, then he's disobeyed the messenger, and whoever disobeyed the messenger, then he's indeed disobeyed Allah. That's a principle in this hadith. Hadith Sahih, reported by Bukhari and Muslim. And likewise, from Ibn Umar, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ala al-mar'i al-muslim as-sam'u wa-ta'a fima ahabba aw kariha, illa an yu'mara bi ma'siyatin fala sam'un wala ta'a." Now look at the principle in this hadith. Remember, these hadith have very important principles. The Messenger said, upon a Muslim man is to hear and to obey in that which he likes and loves, and in that which he dislikes, unless he is commanded with something which is disobedience. In that case, there is no hearing and no disobeying. Now pay careful attention to the wording in these hadith, because they demolish and they refute the falsehood and the batil that is found in the books of these people, like Maududi and Qutb and Hassan al-Banna and all of those people who became affected by their ideologies up until this time. In this hadith, the Messenger said, so in the first few hadith we found that the Messenger commanded obedience in general. So some of these people, they will come and they will say, but what about those things in which which we find hard or that we dislike? What about those things? We don't have to obey the ruler in that. But we find that the Messenger, he didn't leave any door open. He said, "Ala al-mar'i al-muslim as-sam'u wa-ta'a fima ahabba aw kariha." The only exception he made was if the ruler commands you with something which doesn't agree with the Sharia. As for everything else, whether it's to your liking or not to your liking, then you have to obey it. To give you an example, let's say, for example, the ruler, he decides, for example, that it's important to enforce rules, like in our times, he decides to enforce rules regarding how we drive the cars on the road. Right? So he implements a system. There isn't anything in the Sharia regarding this, and it may cause hardship for some people. In that issue, whether you like it or you don't like it, whether it causes you difficulty or not difficulty, you have no choice. You have to obey the ruler in that affair, unless it is something that opposes the Sharia, which in this case it doesn't. So there are many affairs which are like this, which the rulers may sometimes implement within their countries and upon their citizens in order to help the maintenance of the society and so on and so forth. Now some people might find it, well, this is a bit cumbersome and difficult and hard and this and whatever. This is what this hadith is referring to. You have no choice. Whether you like it or whether you don't like it, whether it is easy for you or whether it's hard for you, there is no choice. You have to obey. The only exception is if it involves disobedience to Allah and His Messenger. So understand that. Hadith Sahih, reported by Bukhari and Muslim. Likewise, another important hadith. The Messenger said, as narrated by Auf bin Malik, he said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ala man waliya alayhi wal, fara'ahu ya'ti shay'an min ma'siyatillah, falyakrah alladhi ya'ti min ma'siyatillah, wa la yanzi'u yadan min ta'ah." The Messenger said, verily, the one over whom a ruler has been appointed, and then he sees something from him which involves disobedience to Allah, then let him dislike that which he saw of disobedience to Allah, but let him not remove his hand from obedience to him. Understand this principle as well now. So meaning that anyone who sees a ruler being disobedient to Allah, he falls into sins, he disobeys Allah. What is obligatory upon this person? Two things. He must hate that which he saw of Allah's disobedience, but at the same time, he is not to remove disobedience to the ruler. He is not to remove disobedience to the ruler. And this hadith establishes another principle, or another matter, which refutes and demolishes the arguments of these people, the Khawarij and these renegades, and what they write in their books. Because here, the messenger did not allow the sinfulness of a ruler to be a reason to rebel against him and to avoid disobeying him. Rather, what did the messenger say? He said that upon you is to hate that evil. And if you hate that evil, then you've done that which is obligatory upon you. And as for obeying him, then you've still got to obey him in those things in which obviously in those things which don't involve disobedience to Allah. So understand these two hadith, because they demolish the foundations of many things that these people write about in the books. Hadith Sahih, reported by Muslim, that hadith. Next hadith, Hudhayfa bin al-Yaman, who said that the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, now pay attention to this hadith as well, because it destroys the batil that is found in these people's books. He said, يَكُونُ بَعْدِي أَئِمَّةً لَا يَحْتَدُونَ بِحَدِّي وَلَا يَسْتَنُّونَ بِسُنَّتِي وَسَيَقُومُ فِيكُمْ رِجَالٌ قُلُوبُهُمْ قُلُوبُ شَيَاطِينَ فِي دُثْمَانِ إِنسٍ. He said this to Hudhayfa, and the Messenger said that Hudhayfa said, how should I, and let me translate this for you first. He said, the Messenger said, after me there will be rulers. Then he described their characteristics, 3 characteristics. They will not guide with my guidance. They won't follow my guidance. They will not follow my sunnah. And there will appear amongst you men who will have hearts which are the hearts of devils in the bodies of men. Now have you ever seen 3 blameworthy characteristics which are more blameworthy than these 3? A person doesn't follow the guidance of the messenger. He doesn't follow the sunnah of the messenger. He has the heart of a devil concealed in the body of a man. How severe are these descriptions that the messenger has given? So Hudhayfa said to him, what should I do when I reach this time? What should I do when I reach this time? Meaning if I'm at this time and these people emerge, these rulers emerge, what should I do? What did the messenger say? What did he say? Pay attention. Tasma' tasma', that you hear and you obey the Amir. Number 1. He said, obey and hear the Amir. Even if he strikes your back and he takes your wealth. Even if he strikes your back and he takes your wealth. Where is this guidance from? These are from the words of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Can you see the difference between this and between the batil that is in the books of Mawdudi and Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna and Muhammad Surur and Osama bin Laden and all of these deviants? Can you see the difference? Can you see where this came from? This came from the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you see where that came from the books, in the books of Sayyid Qutb? It came from Alexis Carrel. It came from those philosophers from the previous century like Rousseau. And all those individuals who spoke about revolutions and Marxism and Leninism, that's where their batil came from. So understand this. Understand the difference between the sunnah and between this batil that's entrenched in the minds of the Muslims today. How can there be confusion when we read these texts, when we read these verses? How can there be confusion in the mind of a Muslim when he reads this from the words of the Messenger ﷺ and he reads the kalam of these people? How can there be any confusion? Hadith Sahih, reported by Muslim, from Ibn Umar, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said, whoever took up arms against us, man hamala alina as-salah falaysa minna, that whoever took up arms against us, then he is not from us. Hadith Sahih, reported by Bukhari and Muslim. And likewise from Al-Irbad bin Sariyah, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said, that the Messenger addressed us in a sermon and he said, fear Allah, and upon you is to hear and obey, even if it is an Abyssinian slave. For verily whoever amongst you lives for long, then he will see many differences. So upon you is to follow the sunnah, my sunnah, and the sunnah of the rightly guided Khulafa who come after me. Hadith Sahih, reported by Abu Dawood, At-Tirmidhi, and Ad-Darimi. And likewise, the hadith of Ubadah bin Samit, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said, whoever worshipped Allah, not associating any partners with him, and he established the prayer, and he gave the zakah, and he heard and he obeyed, meaning the ruler, then he can enter paradise from any of the 8 gates of paradise. Hadith Sahih, reported by Ahmad ibn Abi Asim and At-Tabarani. So this is the third principle, principle number 3, that the Messenger ﷺ, that he warned, or that the jama'ah and the unity which Allah has commanded in His book and upon the tongue of His Messenger cannot be sustained except with an imam. And this jama'ah cannot be sustained except with obedience to the imam. And all of these texts, you've seen that in all of these ahadith, we have established clearly that a Muslim must obey the ruler, even if he sees from him disobedience. Even if the ruler doesn't follow the guidance of the Messenger, doesn't follow the sunnah of the Messenger, has the heart of a devil, and he beats you and he takes your wealth, then you still have to obey him. This is the guidance of the Messenger ﷺ. This leads us on to the 4th principle, which is that even if the ruler becomes sinful, he becomes a fajir, his sin becomes open and outward, did the Messenger leave any room for us to not obey him, for us to rebel against him on account of this excuse? No. The Messenger ﷺ, he closed this door as well. So he said, as reported in a hadith reported by Adi bin Hatim, who said, we said, O Messenger of Allah, قُلْنَا يَا رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَا نَسْأَلُكَ أَنْ طَاعَةِ التَّقِي وَلَكِنْ مَنْ فَعَلَ وَفَعَلَ وَذَكَرَ الشَّرْ. So meaning that we said to the Messenger ﷺ, that we're not asking you about obedience to a pious person. We're not asking about you about that. Meaning that we know that obviously we obey a ruler who is pious. We're not asking you about that. But what about the one who did such and such, and such and such? And then they mentioned some affairs of evil. So the Messenger ﷺ said, فَقَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ اتَّقُوا اللَّهِ وَاسْمَعُوا وَأَطِيعُوا. So he told them, fear Allah and hear and obey. So did the Messenger ﷺ leave any doors open for the people to not obey the ruler because he is sinful and commits open acts of sin? No, he didn't. No, he didn't. And this demolishes another batil principle of these people who say that obedience to the ruler is only for the pious imam. It's for the imam who is pious, who fears Allah, who has taqwa. And as for the impious imam, then there is no obedience to him. And you find this batil in the books of these takfiris and jihadis, and who spread the likes of these teachings. So whose word would you take? The words of the Messenger, who doesn't speak from desire, which is revelation sent down upon him, or from the words of those people whose origins come from the philosophers, from the kuffar, and other than them? Whose word would you take? And the Messenger ﷺ, he also then established, so now that we've established that Allah ordered unity, number 1, He prohibited from differing, number 2, that the jama'ah can't be sustained except with obedience to an imam, and that even if the imam is a fajir, he's openly sinful, that we still obey him. So in this scenario so far, we have to still obey the imam. Now, in the sunnah we find there are certain other principles that exist which explain how we should behave, or which prohibit certain things. So principle number 5, the Messenger ﷺ said, or this principle, the 5th principle is, that we have been prohibited from secrecy, having secrecy in the affairs of interacting with the rulers. Secrecy is prohibited. As the Messenger ﷺ said, in the hadith reported by Ibn Umar, who said, a man came to the Messenger ﷺ, awsini. He said, advise me. So the Messenger said, isma' wa ati', hear and obey, wa alayka bil alaniyah, wa iyyaka was sir. So he said, hear and obey, meaning the ruler, and beware of secrecy. Beware of secrecy. Upon you is to be open, and beware of secrecy. So he prohibited secrecy in the affairs of the rulers. And you see that one of the most fundamental characteristics of the beliefs and ideologies of these people who have their roots in these foreign alien ideologies is that they require the secrecy. They need to plot in secret to make their revolutions. They need to plot in secret to start speaking about the sins of the rulers and to spread them. They need to meet in secret and bring people in secret to grow their followers. And all of this is explicitly prohibited in Islam. There is no such thing in Islam of secrecy and secret meetings and plotting and planning, which is a fundamental aspect of all of these groups, of Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and Hizb al-Tahrir, Jama'at al-Takfir, Jama'at al-Jihad, and so on and so forth. Every single one of them, they meet in secret and they plan and they plot, and this is how they acquire their followers, this is how they promote their followers' teaching, and the whole movement is based upon the secrecy. And the Sunnah has prohibited that, has declared that to be prohibited. And then, this hadith, by the way, is Sahih, reported by Ibn Abi Asim and Al-Albani rahimahullah declared it authentic. Principle number 6 is that we have been prohibited from rebelling against them. Rebellion is explicitly prohibited except in 2 situations. There are only 2 situations in which rebellion is permissible. So the messenger, and these 2 situations is when we see outward, open disbelief from the ruler, number 1, or when we see him preventing the salah, preventing the people from the salah. And what are the proofs? First proof is the hadith of Ubadah bin as-Samit, who said, radiyallahu anhu, that we gave the pledge of allegiance to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We gave the pledge of allegiance to him. And what did we pledge allegiance to him upon? Upon hearing and obeying the ruler in both the secret affair, in secret, when we are in secret, and both in open. That we hear and obey in both of these situations. And that and likewise in times of difficulty, and likewise in times of ease, and likewise in times when we see that these rulers are only concerned about themselves and not concerned about the people. Even those situations that we hear and obey in all of these 3 situations, in terms of hardship, in terms of ease, in terms of when we find that the rulers are not really concerned about the rights of our rights, but just their own rights. And he continued, and that we don't contend with the people, we don't contend with those in power. We don't contend with them, we don't try to wrestle the power away from them. Unless, illa an nara kufran bawahan indana fihi min Allahi burhan. So he said, except when we see disbelief which is clear and open and for which we have a proof from Allah. Hadith is Sahih, reported by Bukhari Muslim. And Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, rahimahullah, in the course of speaking about the Algerian crisis which took place in Algeria in the early to mid-90s, and that crisis, that civil war in Algeria, was actually as a result of these same deviant ideologies that we are speaking of today, which came from the books of Mawdudi and Qutb and so on and so forth. And that crisis, that civil war that took place in Algeria, was because of the fitna of takfir, and this hakimiyya, and this ideology that these books brought about. And close to 1 million people were slaughtered and killed as a result of this evil ideology, which just led the people into rebelling and fighting and declaring the government to be apostate, and then the police to be apostate, and then all of the government organizations to be apostate, and then anyone who works for them to be an apostate, and then takfir just spread throughout the whole society, and we found these Khawarij killing the normal Muslims who didn't agree with their belief. So Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, when he was speaking about this Algerian crisis in the form of a discussion with some people, he gave an explanation of this hadith. He said that in this hadith, the messenger said that he mentioned 4 things. He said, illa an nara. An nara, the Shaykh said, it means that we see with our eyes. Then he said, kufran. The messenger said kufran. So secondly, we have to be certain that this thing, this action is indeed kufr. We have to establish from the book and the sunnah this is indeed kufr. Because many of these takfiris and jihadis, they claim something is kufr, it might not be kufr from the book in the book and the sunnah. So we have to establish that this is indeed kufr akbar. Thirdly, bawahan, that this was done openly and outwardly in front of the people, that's clearly visible. This is how it is. And fourthly, indana fihi min Allahi burhan, that in the situation that we have a clear proof from the Quran and the Sunnah that indeed this is disbelief and this is kufr and so on and so forth. So the Shaykh gave a very clear illustration or example or explanation of what this hadith means. So it's prohibited to rebel except it's in this situation. And the second hadith from Salama, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said that there will be after me rulers, so you will acknowledge some good things from them and you will see some evil things from them. You will reject some evil things from them. So the person who rejected that evil, then he will be free, meaning free of any blame. And the person who disliked it in his heart, so he didn't reject the evil but he still disliked it, then he will be safe. But as for the one who became pleased and who followed, and then he kept quiet, meaning that this is a criticism of the one who became pleased and followed and pursued that evil that he saw. And then so the Sahaba said, when the Messenger said this, the Sahaba said, shall we not fight against them and contend with them with the sword? And he said, no, la ma aqamu fikum as-salah. No, so long as they establish the prayer amongst you. So as long as they allow the prayer to be established and don't prevent the people from the salah and they establish the prayer, then we are not allowed to rebel against them. So basically, as we said, principle number 6, khuruj, rebellion, revolution, is completely and totally prohibited, except in these 2 situations. irrespective of whether the ruler is pious or sinful, irrespective of whether he follows the guidance or the sunnah or not, irrespective of whether he beats your back, imprisons you and confiscates your wealth, makes no difference. We have been expressly forbidden. Now compare and contrast between this guidance of the Messenger ﷺ and between these people who write in their books that when we find that there is social injustice in the society, like Sayyid Qutb, when they write books on the issue of social injustice, that when there's injustice in the society, the people, the citizens not getting their rights, there's injustice, then this is when we need to rebel and to replace the rulers and so on and so forth. So they take this social injustice and they say that this is when we should rebel. Where have they taken this ideology from? They've taken it from the communist revolution in Russia. They've taken it from the books of Marx and Lenin and other people like that. This is where they've taken their misguidance from the darknesses of the intellects of those non-Muslims and those misguided people. Where has this come from? This has come from the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and from the speech of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So can we say that the darkness is equal to the light? Of course it's not. So how can any Muslim, how can these people, when they hear these texts and they read these texts, how can anyone be in confusion? How can anyone choose that batil over this clear guidance of the Messenger alayhi salatu wasalam? So principle number 6. Principle number 7 is that we have been prohibited from reviling and abusing them. So look at how comprehensive the guidance of the Messenger ﷺ is. After all of what we've mentioned, the rulers not following the guidance of the Messenger, not following the Sunnah, having the hearts of devils, beating the people, confiscating their wealth, falling into sin, committing open sin, fujjar, open sin, preferring themselves over their subjects. After all of that, did the messengers allow us to revile and to abuse and to call them names and to humiliate them? We find in the Sunnah that even this door hasn't been left open. Rather, he closed it. The Messenger said, alayhi salatu wasalam, in fact, At-Tahawi, in his Aqidah, he said, وَلَا نَرَى الْخُرُوجِ عَلَىٰ أَئِمَّتِنَا وَوُلَاةِ أُمُورِنَا وَإِنْ جَارُوا وَلَا نَدْعُوا عَلَيْهِمْ. That he said, we do not hold it permissible to rebel against our rulers, nor against those who have been appointed over us, even if they are oppressive and tyrannical. And nor do we supplicate against them. We don't make dua against them. Rather, we don't remove ourselves from obeying them, because verily in obeying them, we obey Allah the Mighty and Majestic. And this is obligatory, faridah, this is obligatory. So long as they don't command us with disobedience. And we make supplication for them that they are rectified and that they are pardoned. And this is At-Tahawi, and At-Tahawi is quoting here in his book the consensus and the agreement of the Salaf who came before him. This is their manhaj, this is their methodology. And then from Anas radiallahu anhu, so basically it's not from our manhaj that we supplicate against them, rather we supplicate for them that they are rectified and corrected and so on and so forth. And from Anas bin Malik, who said that the most senior of the Sahaba, of the companions of Muhammad ﷺ, that they used to say that the Messenger ﷺ said, do not revile, do not curse your rulers, do not be deceitful to them, do not hate them, but fear Allah and have patience, for verily the affair will be near. Right? Look at this clear prohibition of reviling and abuse. What did the Messenger command? He said, be patient, have patience, rely upon Allah, and the affair, inshallah, the affair will resolve itself. The affair is closed. This is what is meant. Hadith Sahih, reported by Ibn Abi Asim, and Shaykh al-Bani rahimahullah declared it to be authentic. And likewise, the Messenger said, As-Sultan, dhillullahi fil ard, faman ahanahu, ahanahu Allah, waman akramahu, akramahu Allah. That the Sultan, the ruler, is the shade of Allah upon the earth. Whoever humiliates him, Allah will humiliate that person. And whoever honors him, Allah will honor that person. Right? So we've been commanded that despite all of these things that we see, that we maintain this respect and honor for this ruler. Why? Because there's wisdom in this. There's wisdom in this, in the Sharia for this. And this hadith is authentic, reported by Ibn Abi Asim and Ahmad al-Tiyalisi and at-Tirmidhi and Ibn Hibban, and Shaykh al-Bani rahimahullah declared it to be Hasan. And likewise from Mu'adh bin Jabal, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said, there are 5 things, whoever does a single one of them, then he will have a guarantee from Allah. Whoever visited a sick person, or whoever went out for the janazah of a Muslim, or whoever went out in an expedition, and whoever entered upon an imam, he came to his imam, and he came in front of him, and he wanted to admonish him. He came to admonish him and advise him. Or whoever sat in his own house, so that the people would be safe from him. The 5 things that I mentioned here. So from them is that a man, he goes to a ruler, goes to him, and he admonishes him, meaning privately, and he encourages him and admonishes him. So whoever does that, he has a guarantee from Allah. Meaning, what does this mean? It means here that we haven't been ordered, or we haven't been permitted to revile and abuse and to curse and so on. We've been prohibited from that, expressly and explicitly. So this is number 7, principle number 7, prohibition of reviling and abusing the rulers, despite everything which has been mentioned previously. Principle number 8, not only did the messenger stop there, he didn't even stop there. Principle number 8 is that he then ordered that we advise the ruler. That we advise the ruler. The messenger said in the hadith of Tamim ad-Dari, that the messenger ﷺ said, Adinun nasiha, and the Sahaba said, Qulna liman, to whom, O messenger of Allah? So he said that the religion consists of being sincere and giving sincerity of purpose. So we said, to whom, O messenger of Allah? So he said, Lillahi wa li kitabihi wa li rasulihi wa li a'immatil muslimin wa ammatihim. That you have sincerity of purpose to Allah and to His book and to His messenger and the rulers of the Muslims and the general folk. And likewise from Zayd bin Thabit, this hadith is reported by Muslim in his Sahih. On the next hadith from Zayd bin Thabit, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said, there are 3 characteristics which the heart of a Muslim never has aversion towards, never has any dislike or hatred towards, the 3 characteristics. First of them, being sincere in one's actions to Allah. Secondly, giving nasiha, giving advice to the rulers of the Muslims, and adhering to their jama'ah. Because verily, the supplication of the rulers encompasses those who are behind them. Meaning that when the ruler makes a supplication, it is also for the people that they rule over. This hadith is sahih, reported by the people of the Sunnah. And it's authentic. So, did the messenger just leave the rulers committing this sin and the disobedience, and that we still obey them, but we just leave them? Did the messenger leave it there? No. He said, rather, we have to advise them. Why? Because the rulers are from amongst the Muslimin. And the rights of a Muslim upon another Muslim are 6. As occurs in the well-known hadith that giving the salam and visiting the sick and so on and so forth. And Shaykh Ubaid al-Jabri, hafidhahullah, he used this hadith as a proof to show that this hadith is a proof that giving advice to a ruler is necessary. Because the ruler is a Muslim brother. And he's included within this general hadith. And the hadith of Tamim ad-Dari is more specific. And this hadith that we just mentioned of Zayd bin Thabit is very specific, that we give advice to the rulers of the Muslims. So the messenger even gave us that guidance, that we correct them, that we advise them. Now, some of these people of Batil, their understanding of advice, what is their understanding of advice? Their understanding of advice is that they sit behind a computer 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 miles away from the ruler in the Muslim countries, and they think advice is shouting and bawling and abusing and reviling the ruler, and they think that this is what is meant in the Sunnah. Or they claim that this is rectification, this is rectifying the ruler. And this is batil, this is falsehood, and this is not what is from the Sunnah. Rather, this nasiha, did the messenger leave any room for anyone to interpret how this nasiha should take place? No, the messenger didn't leave that door open. Rather, he explained how this advice should be given. He explained how this advice should be given. So he said, so this is principle number 9 now. Principle number 8, that we've been ordered to give advice. Principle number 9, he didn't leave the door open for us to interpret how we give this advice. He explained how this advice should be given. So from that which is found in the Sunnah, from Iyaad bin Ghunaym, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said that whoever desires, man arada an yansaha li sultan, that whoever wishes to give advice to the person or to the ruler, then let him take him by his hand. Let him not do it in open. Let him not do it outwardly and openly, but rather let him take him by his hand and take him and then advise him. And if he hears him, if he listens to him, then fine. If the ruler listens to him, then fine. And if he doesn't listen, then at least that person has fulfilled the obligation that was upon him. Hadith Sahih reported by Ahmad ibn Abi Asim. Right? So the way that advice is given, the general principle of the Sunnah is that you go to the ruler, you take him in seclusion, and that you advise him. Either this, or if you're not in a position, then you, someone who is in a position, from the scholars or from the whatever, that they address him and advise the ruler in their own particular way. This is how it is. This is how this nasiha has been intended. And likewise, as occurred in the time of Uthman, when a Sahabi, when Ubaidullah bin al-Khiyar, he came and he said, I came to Usama bin Zayd, and I said to him, why don't you go and advise Uthman? Why don't you go advise Uthman and tell him to establish the ruling upon Al-Walid, the had upon Al-Walid. So Usama said to him, do you think that I'm not going to advise him except in front of you people? Wallahi, by Allah, I've already advised him in that which is between me and him. And I don't want to be the first person to open up the door to an evil, to this evil. Meaning that this person wanted him to go and advise Uthman in open and, advise him to do such and such. And Usama said that I've already advised him. I've done it in private between me and that which is him. I don't want to be a person to open up this door to evil. And this is, the wave of this narration is Sahih, reported by Bukhari and Muslim. And this shows to you the implementation of the Sahaba of the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This is how advice to a ruler is given. In seclusion, in private. That's principle number 9. Principle number 10. Did the Messenger stop there? Did he leave any more gaps? No. You find he even closed another gap. Because another principle is that even if after being given advice, the ruler doesn't listen, and he persists in what he's upon, then we've still been commanded to obey him, and not to rebel against him, and to give nasihah to him. And the Sharia still didn't give us any permissibility of rebelling against him. So we find that from the narrations from Wa'il bin Hujr, who said that we said, O Messenger of Allah, do you see that if there was a ruler over us who would prevent our rights, he wouldn't give us our rights, but he would ask for his own rights? What do you say? What do you advise? So the Messenger said, Isma'u wa ati'u, hear and obey, for verily that which is for verily what they've been burdened with and what they've been tasked with is upon them, and what you've been burdened with and tasked with is upon them. So in other words, that the rulers have their own rights and obligations to Allah. That's their responsibility. If they don't fulfill it, that's upon them. But you too have rights, you too have obligations towards Allah, from which is that you hear and obey them. So you must still fulfill that. You must still fulfill that. So the Messenger, he didn't leave any room that if they continue to prefer themselves and to ask for their rights and not give their rights to the subjects, then still you have sabr and you hear and you obey, and that doesn't change anything that was mentioned previously in the principles that we mentioned before. And likewise, that this hadith is a report by Muslim. Another hadith, the Messenger said, as reported by Anas bin Malik, he said, "Satulquna ba'di athara, fasbiru hatta talqawni." So he said that you will soon encounter after me athara. He mentioned this word athara. Now this word is very hard to translate in a single word in English, but I'll explain to you what the meaning in general is. This is when, for example, the rulers, when they don't really care about the subjects, all they're concerned is about themselves and their own benefits, and so what they do is that from the actions you see that they're just giving preference to themselves, and whether it's in terms of wealth or possession or anything else, this is athara, giving themselves just being concerned with their own benefit and so on and so forth, and just neglecting their citizens. This is athara. So the Messenger said that soon you will see after this, and you will encounter after me athara, this. Fasbiru hatta talqawni. What did he command? He said fasbiru, have patience up until you meet me. And when he says up until you meet me, this is a command for the whole of the ummah. Because obviously when we meet him, when he says to the Sahaba up until you meet me, this means at the Hawd. This means on the Yawm al-Qiyamah. So this shows that this command is in effect up until the Day of Judgment. Reported by Bukhari and Muslim, hadith is Sahih. And likewise, another hadith from Abu Hurairah who said, the Messenger said, after me there will be khulafa, and they will increase in number. So he said, what do you command us? He said, fulfill the bay'atul awwal fal awwal, meaning that when these rulers emerge and they're diverse and separate, then give the bay'ah to the first one, and if another one appears, then give the bay'ah to that one, meaning in a different region, and then fulfill the rights that are for them, meaning fulfill their rights, but ask Allah for your rights that you have over them. So another clear command, that you should continue to give them their rights, and as for your rights over them, then you should ask Allah for them. Even if they don't give them to you, have patience, have sabr, but ask Allah for those rights. Hadith Sahih reported by Bukhari and Muslim. And so this establishes that even if they don't listen to the nasiha, it is still not permitted for you to remove the hand of obedience. Not permitted still. And then, did the Messenger stop there? Did he leave any other door? No, he didn't. Rather, he closed another door, which is that he prohibited from publicizing their mistakes or their sins and their iniquities on the minbar, meaning publicly. He prohibited from that. So after everything that we mentioned, he still didn't even allow the Muslims to speak openly about their sins or their iniquities or whatever else that they might fall into. Hadith reported, well, in fact, first of all, an ayah from the Quran, and this ayah in the Quran in itself is sufficient. The Messenger, ﷺ, he warned us, and Allah warned us from, spreading the falsehood of the people on the pulpits, in the sermons, on the pulpits. And the reason is because this just leads to the spreading of fahisha, evil amongst the people in general. And there's a verse in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and Allah is speaking about a specific group of people. He says, إن الذين يحبون أن تشيء الفاحشة في الذين آمنوا لهم عذاب أليم في الدنيا والآخرة والله يعلم وأنتم لا تعلمون. The verse, the rough meaning of the verse, verily those who love that obscenity, fahisha, should be spread amongst those who believe, then for them is a tormenting punishment in this life and the hereafter. And Allah knows, and you do not know. When we go back to the books of tafsir, and we look at what is the meaning of this verse, the meaning of this verse is, for example, let's say a believer, he commits a sin, he might steal, he might fornicate, he might fall into adultery, whatever. So then somebody else comes along, and then he starts spreading this sin amongst the people. Oh, did you know so-and-so fell into this? Did you know so-and-so did this? Did you know so-and-so did this? So now he spreads this news amongst the people. This is the person who is being spoken of here in this ayah. The person who does this action. He takes the sins of the people, and then he spreads it amongst the people, the news of that sin. This is what is being referred to. And likewise, this ayah is in Surah Nur, the 24th Surah, verse 19. And in its origin, is referring to the slander against Aisha radiallahu anha. But the meaning is general and applies in general, as the scholars have explained, to anyone who falls into this act. And likewise, from Abi Hurairah, who said that the Messenger ﷺ said, إِذَا قَالَ الرَّجُلْ حَلَكَ النَّاسِ فَهُوَ أَحْلَكَهُمْ. That when a man says that the people have perished, then in reality he's the one who's caused them to perish. Meaning that a man shouldn't really make these general statements based upon what he sees from the people, that they are destroyed. Because really, by that statement of his, in essence, he's destroying them. So this is another prohibition of speaking in that manner. And this hadith is sahih, reported by a Muslim. So the Messenger, ﷺ, he didn't even leave that door open either. And this leads us now to the final principle upon which we conclude. Number 12 is that the Messenger, ﷺ, that in general, when we look at the text in the Sunnah, he prohibited the causing and the stirring of trouble, just general incitation, and stirring up things within the society, and creating these tribulations. The Messenger prohibited that. And we can gather this from all of the texts that we've heard already, and from many other texts that we find in the Sunnah. So we find that he prohibited the causes that lead to these tribulations, irrespective of how small and insignificant they might be. And he prohibited from the taking up of arms, and he prohibited many things. And we find in the hadith reported by Al-Miqdad bin Al-Aswad, he said that the Messenger ﷺ said, إِنَّ السَّعِيدَ لَمَنْ جَنِبَ الْفِتَنِ وَلَمَنِ ابْتُلِيَ وَصَبَرَ. That verily, the happy person is the one who avoided the tribulations. He kept out of them, kept away from them. And the one who, when he was put to trial, he was patient. Hadith Sahih, reported by Abu Dawood, authenticated by Shaykh al-Albani rahimahullah. And so from this, inshallah ta'ala, I hope you can see clearly the light in the revelation of Allah, and the light in the Sunnah of the Messenger ﷺ, and the clarity that you find in these narrations, and how things are so crystal clear, and the difference between that and the batil that these people that we're speaking of, who are in the present times, the people like Osama bin Laden, and the people of takfir, and people who speak about jihad when they know nothing about the Sharia jihad. That there's a great difference between this and that. And inshallah, with this we hope that these affairs of the Sunnah can be revived, because as we said, these people, just like in the first times, when I said the introduction that we gave, how when these innovations became introduced in the early times, the bid'ahs of the Khawarij, and the Shia, the Rafida, and the Qadariyah, and the Murjiya, and the Mu'tazila, and over time what happened is that they became spread, and the Sunnah became forgotten. The Sunnah became neglected up until it reached a point where the Sunnah was treated as bid'ah, and the bid'ah was treated as Sunnah. If you didn't believe that the Quran was created, you were a kafir. If you didn't reject the attributes of Allah, you were a mushabbih. You were someone who likened Allah to His creation. This is how it was. And this is how it became widespread. These innovators, they gained the strength in those times. And that's how it was. And Ahlul Sunnah were persecuted on account of adhering to the correct beliefs. Likewise, in our times, you find that these beliefs are widespread amongst the Muslims, even the general Muslims. And this is how it is. So with this, inshallah, we hope that these principles that you've heard these texts that you've heard from the words of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that we learn them, we memorize them, we teach them, we propagate them, we spread them, we teach them to the Muslimin, so that this batil of these people can be refuted and removed from the society. And finally, I want to finish with 3 quotations, inshallah ta'ala, if you just bear with me, because they're very, very important. I know, inshallah, the lecture's gone for quite a while, but have sabr. For the sake of completion, I want to mention 3 quotations, two of which are from Ibn al-Qayyim, which should be written in gold, which are amazing. The first quotation is a short one from Al-Imam al-Shawkani, and he gives the definition of someone who is al-Baghi. Al-Baghi is someone who basically is a renegade. He gives the definition of a renegade, someone who basically abandons the jama'ah of the Muslims. So he said, Ash-Shawkani said, and he said in As-Sayl al-Jarrar, he said, Al-Baghi, he's the one who removes himself from the obedience to the Imam. And he basically attacks and reviles this Imam in the issue of the benefit to the Muslims in general, to the benefit of the Muslims in his society. Meaning that he criticizes him for failing to maintain the benefits for the Muslims in the society. And he does this, meaning he criticizes him upon other than basira, upon other than knowledge, upon other than insight. And he does it in a manner that isn't from the angle of giving sincere advice. And then he continued up until he said, and it's not permissible to make khuruj, to rebel against the rulers, even if they reach whatever levels of oppression that they reach, so long as we don't see from them open, clear, manifest disbelief. And the hadith in this regard are mutawatira, that they are mutawatir in this regard. Now look at the definition that he gave. Someone who first of all removes himself from the obedience of the Imam, and what's his excuse? He starts attacking the Imam because he's not looking after the people. The people are in poverty, yet this ruler himself, he's in riches. The ruler is enjoying this luxury and that luxury, yet the people are in poverty. Like these kind of things. He's bringing these kind of things. And he does it in a way where you can tell that he isn't really sincere. Wallahi, this definition, there are specific names I can mention, like Al-Muhammad Al-Mas'ari, who's in London, who left Saudi Arabia, went to London, and then he started publicizing the sins of the rulers, sending faxes that this prince did such and such, this prince did such and such, this ruler did such and such, and sending them into the kingdom from within London, and spreading this dissension amongst the people, and turning those people against the rulers. This is this individual. This definition fits this individual. And likewise Sa'ad al-Faqih, and likewise Osama bin Laden. These are the bughat, these are the renegades. This is who they are. That's the first quotation. Second quotation is from Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, and he said regarding the open rejection of the rulers and the kings and rebelling against them. So Ibn al-Qayyim said in his book I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, so he said, this is a great topic and it contains much benefit, and due to ignorance of this topic, a great mistake has occurred and fallen upon the Sharia. And then he went on to say that the Prophet ﷺ, he legislated for his ummah the obligation of rejecting the evil, so that when we reject the evil, the goodness that Allah and His Messenger intended and that they love is actually brought about. Right, so this is meaning that this is the intention behind rejecting the evil. We reject the evil so that goodness can come in turn. And then he says, but when rejecting the evil leads to what is more evil and more hated by Allah and His Messenger, then it is not allowed to reject that evil. So meaning that if we were to reject the evil and as a result of it more evil entails, then it is prohibited to reject the evil in that case. And even if Allah, He dislikes the evil which is occurring, even if He dislikes and hates it, we still can't prohibit that evil because it will lead to a greater evil. And then Ibn al-Qayyim says, and this is like the rejection against the kings, meaning against the rulers, and those who are in authority, by coming out against them. And for verily, doing this is the basis and the foundation of every evil and every fitna till the end of time. So Ibn al-Qayyim said that this is the asl of the fitna and the tribulation up until the end of time. And he said that the companions, they asked permission from the Messenger ﷺ for killing the leaders who just delayed the prayer from its proper time. And so they said to him, should we not kill them? And he said, no. So long as they continue to establish the prayer and at least lead the people in and pray, then no. And he also said, whoever sees something from his leader that he dislikes, then let him be patient and let him not raise his hand from the leader's obedience. And then Ibn al-Qayyim says, whoever reflects upon the greatest and the smallest trials that have occurred in Islam, all of the trials which have occurred in Islam, then he will see that all of them are due to the negligence and the wastage of this principle, and the lack of having patience upon seeing this evil occur, meaning from the rulers. So this person, when he sees this evil, he hastily tries to bring about the end of this evil, thinking he's doing good, meaning that thinking he's doing good. So he seeks to bring about this end, and as a result of this, a greater evil is brought about. This is what happens. And then he said, and the Messenger ﷺ, he saw the greatest of evils in Mecca, and he wasn't able to change them. And even when Allah, he gave victory to the Muslims regarding Mecca, he gave, the Muslims took over Mecca, and when it became Darul Islam, the Messenger, he wanted to change the Kaaba and return it back to the foundations of Ibrahim, where Ibrahim had originally built it upon. But even though he had the ability to do it, he was prevented from doing it because he feared that because the Quraysh were new to Islam and they recently left Kufr, he didn't want to do something drastic in order to repel them. So he still didn't even do that. Right? He kept away from doing something good out of the fear that more evil would arise. So this is a principle. And for this reason, the Messenger, he never granted the permission for showing rejection against the leaders, with the use of force, with the hands. Why? Because of due to the greatness of the results that come afterwards on account of it, meaning the evil which occurs after it. That's the first quotation from Ibn al-Qayyim, and you can see from that he says that this is a great affair, and because of the wastage of this principle, this has led to the greatest and the smallest of trials in Islam from history. That has been the origin. And finally, inshallah, if you just bear with me, the final quotation from Ibn al-Qayyim, it wouldn't be complete if we didn't read this. And this in itself is a complete and total and utter destruction of the very foundations of the methodologies of these people. The methodologies of Sayyid Qutb and Hassan al-Banna and Mawdudi and Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq and all of these groups and organizations, Ikhwan al-Muslimin, Ihya al-Turath, and all of these peoples in all the various forms and manifestations, Jama'at al-Jihad, Takfir wal-Hijrah, and so on and so forth. It totally destroys their foundations. So pay very close attention to what Ibn al-Qayyim is saying. He says in his book, Miftah Dar as-Sa'ada, Volume 2, page 177, he says, and reflect in the wisdom of Allah the Most High, the wisdom in Allah making the kings of the servants, meaning the kings who rule the servants, and their leaders and their rulers to be of exactly the same type as the actions of the servants. Right? Meaning that reflect upon this wisdom, how Allah, He makes the rulers who rule the people to be of the same nature as the actions that the people perform, meaning those whom they rule over. Rather, it is as if their actions, meaning the actions of the servants, whatever actions the servants fall into, became manifest in the appearance of those rulers and kings, of their rulers and kings. So he continues, if they, the servants, the subjects, if they remain upright, then their kings will remain upright. And if they turn away from being upright, then they, meaning the kings, will too turn away from being upright. And if they, meaning the servants, oppress themselves, if they mean oppress each other, then their kings and their rulers will oppress them. And if there appears plotting and deception between the servants, so the servants, they plot and they're deceptive towards each other, then their rulers will be made to behave likewise towards them. And if they, the servants, prevent the rights of Allah, meaning that the rights of Allah between themselves, and they become stingy with respect to that, meaning that the Muslims have rights between each other, like in terms of wealth and other than that, then they become stingy with respect to that, and then they withhold those rights, like for example giving sadaqah and so on and so forth, and then they become stingy, they withhold those rights, then their kings and their rulers will withhold from the servants the rights that the servants have upon the kings. Right? So meaning if the people become stingy and withhold the rights between themselves, then the rulers will withhold the rights that they have upon the rulers. And then, if they misappropriate and take from those people amongst them who are considered to be weak, meaning that when the people start monopolizing upon the weakness of other people, so they start taking their wealth or start misappropriating from them, and they take these things, those things that they don't deserve to take from other people, then the kings will take from them, will take from the servants what they don't deserve to take from them, and they will inflict taxes upon them and other types of services. They will inflict this hardship upon them. And everything that the servants take away from the weak person, as I said, when they take advantage of people and they take things away from the weak person, whenever they do that, then the kings will take away from them likewise with power and force and severity. So, meaning, with all these examples, their actions, meaning the actions of the servants, became manifest and appeared in the actions of their kings and their rulers. And then he continues, after clarifying this, he then says, it is not from the divine wisdom, meaning it's not from Allah's wisdom, that the evildoers and the sinners are made to be ruled over, except by anyone who is their like. Understand? So meaning it's not from Allah's wisdom, that people who are sinful and fall into the likes of these actions, it's not from Allah's wisdom, that they be ruled by anyone, except one who is just like them. And then he continues, he says, and when the very first band of Islam, the first generations of Muslims, when they were the best of generations, and when they were the most pious of them, then their rulers were likewise. And so meaning Abu Bakr, radiallahu anhu, and Umar radiallahu anhu, and Uthman and Ali, and those who were righteous after them, like Umar bin Abdul Aziz and other than them. So when they were like that, then the rulers were like that. And then he continues, and when they become corrupt, when they became corrupted, then their rulers likewise became corrupted over them. Thus, the wisdom of Allah refuses that the likes of Muawiyah and Umar bin Abdul Aziz are putting authority over us, over the likes of us of these times, like over us in these times. Who's Ibn al-Qayyim talking about? He's talking about in his generation, the 8th century after Hijrah, meaning that the wisdom of Allah, it refuses that Muawiyah, even Muawiyah and Umar bin Abdul Aziz, that that we are worthy that they should be ruling over us, let alone the likes of Abu Bakr and Umar. So meaning, leave aside Abu Bakr and Umar radiallahu anhu, even we are not worthy and fit of having the likes of Muawiyah and Umar bin Abdul Aziz rule over the likes of us. We're not like that, we're not fit for that. And then, so obviously, if he's speaking about his time, then what would you say over the likes of our time? Who, the individuals like, Bin Laden, and these people like Umar Bakri and other than them, when you look at these people and what they're about, do you think they deserve to have pious rulers ruling over them? Or when you look at the Muslimin and what they're falling into, of all of these calamities and these sins and these evils, do you think they deserve to have pious rulers? Do you think we deserve pious rulers? Of course not. So the wisdom of Allah refuses that should take place. So then he says, rather our rulers are in accordance with our nature, and the rulers of those who came before us were in accordance with their nature. And both of these two matters necessitate wisdom and what it requires. So, inshallah, this is the end of this quotation. And with this, I hope, inshallah ta'ala, that this affair has become clear and manifest, and that we are in absolutely no confusion whatsoever. A Muslim can't be in any confusion after he's heard the likes of these narrations from the Quran and from the Sunnah and from the Salaf and from the Sahaba and from the Tabi'een and from the Imams of the Salaf. Like we've heard these words from Ibn al-Qayyim. It's not possible for anyone to remain confused. So inshallah ta'ala, we'll end this lesson here. And as I said, that this is another issue that concerns the rectification of the Muslimin and the condition of the Muslimin. So I hope inshallah that we've learned from this and that we can in turn educate other people, other Muslims and those in our communities, and to revive the Sunnah, to revive these principles of the Sunnah, and to remove the innovations which have become widespread in our times. And with this, inshallah, we finish the lecture.